Next, I'm going to do history because I have a book that I just got in the mail recently that's very much connected to the West, history of the West. But I put it in the history section. I'll just get that. I'll start with this one here. It doesn't have a dust jacket, but I'll show you the side here. The Wooden Horse, The Liberation of the Western Mind from Odysseus to Socrates. This is by Keld Zeruneith. You can just look up the title, though, The Wooden Horse. This is translated from the Danish and edited, and it was first published. Well, this one's published in 2007. I guess it's 2007. I figured maybe it was old or older. I read a little bit of this. It goes through its remains in ancient history. So it talks about Odysseus all the way up to Socrates. So Odysseus, Socrates, it talks about the playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides. And one thing I got from the beginning of it I thought was interesting, or maybe I should, I'll read you from the foreword. He talks a little bit about his purpose, and it was essentially about finding out one's roots. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay, here we go. So he's just talking about a little bit of a biography of himself. He says here, even while I was at grammar school, classical culture was dubbed ancient rubbish, and nobody could understand why you would waste your time on something that has gathered so much dust. My teachers could apparently not conceptualize, much less legitimize the fact that for each generation it is almost a matter of life and death to preserve its historical heritage, to give it its own explanation as part of the historical process and a continual formation of consciousness. There's his purpose. And I read a little bit of the first page, a few pages of it. One thing I thought was interesting, just kind of as a common knowledge thing. You may have heard of the Trojan horse. It's kind of a metaphor, right? Apparently the Trojan horse was never written about like that until much later. Homer originally wrote of the wooden horse, not a Trojan horse. That was a later phrase. And so that's why I guess the book itself is called The Wooden Horse. But that's not really what it's about. That's just one little piece. Okay, more history. I guess I'm doing these in order of the historical era. So next is a good find. Victor Davis Hanson, The Western Way of War. You should look up Victor David Hanson on YouTube. He's got quite a few lectures, and he's always very informative about the West. He's certainly a classicist, which means he's a historian, but he delves with the ancient Greece and Rome and things like that. But he is a warfare. Ancient warfare specialist. And he's got some great stuff. I'm trying to think if I have anything else by Victor David Hanson. I know I have Carnage and Cultures, I think I have by him. But this is another one I have, The Western Way of War. Infantry Battle in Classical Greece. This is also with an introduction by John Keegan. I know I have a book by John Keegan it's called The Iraq War. This one was written in 89, and I know one thing that I don't know if this is argued for in this book, but Victor David Hanson argues that you may know that in ancient Greece there was quite a few wars with Persia, especially a great battle in which Greece was outnumbered astronomically. You may have seen 300. That's the battle. It's not called 300, but it was about 300 Spartans. And he talks about that the Western way of war, it must be this book that argues this, the Western way of war is just far superior than any other kind of warfare that has been had in the world in terms of formation, in terms of training, in terms of rather than conscription. You've got citizenry that trains and has their own career at the end of the day, but citizenry that's willing to fight, volunteer armies. Persian armies were usually slaves, conscripted citizens. Persia had such a massive empire that to form armies, they just went from village to village and conscripted people. Greece rose their own armies. Their own people defended their own lands. And so, also technology, of course, but just the way of war was different, and that led to the success of Greece. If Persia had run over Greece in that era, we would live in a different world. That would certainly be Victor David Hanson's thesis, or not thesis in this book, but I think he would agree with that. So very interesting how Greece survived that onslaught, where there's tons more Persians than Greeks, and yet the Greeks survived that and safeguard their territory. Okay, next is a few books on the French Revolution. I don't have anything on the French Revolution, so I finally randomly found a few. Here's Alex de Tocqueville. It's called The Old Regime and the French Revolution. So it says here that it was originally published in 1856, and it's a survey of the French Revolution, including it's looking at the old regime, administration, tribunals, official manners and customs, class divisions. He also explores a range of influences on the rebellion's development, including the political rise of the nation's literary figures. Probably, was he talking about Voltaire, maybe? Not sure if Voltaire was around the French Revolution. I don't know about that. It says the growth of anti-religious attitudes and the widespread desire for reform and liberty. You may know the French Revolution was a pretty ridiculous era. All the killings that occurred, indiscriminately it seems. But I'll be glad to learn more about the French Revolution. I have another one on the French Revolution by Edmund Burke. Reflections on the Revolution in France. So it says here originally written in 1790. So this is actually earlier than de Tocqueville. It says here that Edmund Burke was the father of conservatism, father of modern conservatism. It says he was born in Ireland, but I always thought Burke was an American, but I guess not. Edmund Burke must be a British, well, he's Irish. It says he was born in Ireland, but Edmund Burke must have been part of England's, an England conservative thinker. That must be it. Oh, I found a bookmark. Now it's funny, you get, oh wow, it's got little page numbers. When you buy used books, once in a while you find the weirdest bookmarks. This one has all kinds of page numbers on it and little quotes. I'll have to keep that one. I've gotten one book I got. It was a bookmark that goes on the corner of the page. I guess people do that. I don't know why, but all right. Here's one on First World War. It's called Canada. It's an old one. Canada at War, 1914 to 1918. It actually contains two books in here. One is the Canada at War, and the other one is called A Story of Five Cities by Renison. And I read a little bit of it. This was printed in 1919 in Toronto. And it's interesting because it talks about the World War. It had no idea that World War I was World War I. It just talks about the World War. And I believe, was World War not called the war to end all wars? I think that was it. So it's strange, of course, to read that. And these people don't know that this is just the beginning, and that the things that occurred in World War I will end up leading to another war. Mostly, I think the oppression of the Germans, Austro, what do they call it? Austro-German? Something like that. No, I guess it was Austro-Hungary. Mostly that oppression radicalized the population, as what I know anyways, which it leads to, I guess they began not before the Weimar Republic. I can't remember what it was called now, but the Weimar Republic was formed, and then it collapsed, and then Hitler took power. I do not believe he was democratically elected. I think he just took power, but I don't know enough about that to really speak about it. Pentagon Papers. And I think this was about Vietnam? Yes, Vietnam. The Secret History of the Vietnam War, complete and unabridged series as published by the New York Times. Interesting. Now, I'm sure most people watching this are American. I don't know. I guess I should say it anyways, but you should know. Vietnam War was very, very hostile in terms of civil disobedience that occurred in the States during the Vietnam War. Most of the population, or at least a good chunk of the population that was brave enough to go out and protest, they were not happy with the Vietnam War, and so a lot of people study it. And I guess that was enough of an impetus to have a newspaper publish the Pentagon Papers, the New York Times. There's a few little pictures in here. Maybe I'll just show you two of them. Here's some pictures. So now I've got something on the Vietnam War because I don't think I have anything on the Vietnam War. So there, I got one thing on the Vietnam War. Okay, and last one, kind of related, is the 9/11 Commission report. Final report of the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, the authorized edition. You know, it raises red flags to me when I see that, because then I wonder how much truth is in here. At least one can say that this is the mainstream truth of 9/11. This is the authorized truth. And so one must be careful. One must supplement such a book, meaning that one must go find other sources of information. But anyways, it's in good condition, and I thought it would be worth having in case I want to flip through it someday. There's all kinds of 9/11 conspiracy theories. Very strange how the buildings went down. There's also stuff about how the steel beams could have melted with just jet fuel that's just not hot enough to melt it. Whether buildings demolished. So I don't know if this report has anything to say about those things, or if it just gives its own story. Looks like some people signed it. There's a bunch of signatures here. So, anyways, it's worth having, and it's worth knowing the authorized position. It's worth knowing. Okay, I'll do the little sections first. I'll leave the fiction. I imagine the fiction is going to be its own video, so I'll leave that alone till the end. Next, I'll do economics.